So you just got your brand new DJI Osmo Action 5 and you're excited to start shooting, right? Well, here's the thing. More likely than not, the colors looked a little flat, the stabilization wasn't dialed in quite right, and you hope that it doesn't happen again. Today, I'm going to show you the exact 10 settings that I changed on the DJI Osmo Action 5 Pro before I even think about hitting record. By the end of this video, you'll have a camera that's dialed in specifically for your shooting style, and you'll never have to worry about missing that perfect moment because your settings weren't right. Let's start with the foundational 4 settings you absolutely cannot skip. The first being the video setting. You gotta shoot in 4K. If you want the best settings for your camera, it's 4K without a doubt. Let's go ahead and turn our camera on, and out of our video mode, let's swipe up and select 4K 16:9. And for me, I like to generally shoot in 24 frames per second. Now, do note that 4K is going to eat up storage faster than 1080p, but the image quality difference is significant. Plus, if you're planning to export in 1080p, shooting in 4K gives you room in your frame to crop and reframe and post without losing that quality. For most of what I shoot, 4K gives me the best image out of this camera and all the cameras that I have. If you're ever worried about storage, consider getting a bigger micro SD card, as it's cheaper than regretting not having that extra resolution when you needed it. This camera shoots wide, but if you can't crop in, then you're missing out. Okay, so we're shooting in 4K, but here's where most people start to mess up. They don't understand when to use the different frame rates. So I'm setting mine to 24 frames per second for most situations. This is because I set my other cameras to 24 frames per second, and it's a consistent look across all the footage. It gives it the cinematic motion blur that I like. This is going to be great if you're using it for everyday activities like walking, preparing your coffee or matcha for the day, getting boba at the end of the day, and all that vlogging jazz. Unless you're really getting into the action and playing pickleball or like doing parkour, then you don't need to shoot anything above 30 frames per second. Now, you may be tempted to shoot at everything at 60 frames per second, thinking more is better, but unless you're planning to slow things down in post, 24 frames per second is the sweet spot. It looks natural, and most importantly, it takes up less space on your micro SD card. If you're filming yourself make coffee, 24 frames per second. But if you're filming yourself like a barista and showing yourself making those cool frothy designs, then yeah, make 60 frames per second. Make it nice and slow-mo. When you switch to 60 frames per second, this does give you smooth 2.5 times slow motion when you bring it in to a 24 frame per second timeline in your video editing software. For even more dramatic slow motion, then yes, we can go ahead and switch all the way to 120 frames per second. This is perfect for things like capturing the splash when someone jumps into a pool, or maybe parkour POV. You'll get that nice buttery smoothness when you're at 5 times slow motion. You could also achieve this by going into the slow motion mode in the bottom left hand corner. If you really want to get crazy with it, the Action 5 Pro can shoot up to 240 frames per second in 1080p. If I'm shooting this many frames per second, I'm doing something like hitting a tennis ball and analyzing my tennis form, or the form of the pros if I'm going to like the US Open. Also, just remember, the higher the frame rate, the more storage that you will be using on your micro SD card. So when you're doing all that action stuff, go ahead, shoot those high frame rate shots. Otherwise, 24 frames, 30 frames, you're good. Right now, having great resolution and frame rate is great. But what about for our photos? Because it does take good photos. Well, this next setting is what separates the Action 5 Pro from other cameras. You want to know how I know this is a pro camera? Because it lets us shoot raw. Let's go ahead and switch over to our photo mode. Bottom left hand corner, tap on photo. We're going to go to the right hand side here and hit format. And we're going to make sure it says JPEG and RAW. Now, when you take photos, you get a JPEG photo, which you can go ahead and share directly to socials and even import it into your phone or device like an iPad or something. And then when you look at the other file that comes with it, it's a .dng file, which is a raw file that allows you to mess with the highlights and the shadows and the blacks of the image without breaking it. Mess with the colors even. Most likely you're shooting landscapes with this, or even if you're shooting like selfies with it, it's gonna bring out a lot of color and be able to give you more playroom. than if you were using a JPEG. Some point and shoot cameras don't even give you this option. The way that I use this kind of workflow is that most of the time I get back from the trip, I'll go ahead and import everything into my computer, edit the RAWs that I like, and delete the JPEGs that I don't need. It's the best of both worlds, being able to document the moment and have those memories, the JPEGs, and then being able to bring out the best of those images in the RAWs. And then delete the old JPEGs because these are so much better. Now that we've got our file format locked in, let's go ahead and make sure that we are recording footage that isn't shaky. So for setting number 4, we're going to go ahead and mess with our stabilization mode for our video. Sorry, I'm double backing here. Make sure that we're back in video mode. Slide up, and in the top right hand corner, we have these different stabilization modes, and we're gonna go ahead and select Rock Steady Plus. Now, if you stay under 60 frames per second, you have horizon balancing. One of the coolest features of this camera is the in-body stabilization. I use Rock Steady Plus when I'm using something like a helmet mount, a necklace mount, a chest mount. It just makes the image much smoother. Otherwise, I'll be go ahead and dialing in the horizon balancing, which is also good for behind the camera. This camera is meant for movement, but no one's really gonna watch all that movement. If it's too jarring, like you're on a roller coaster ride, just bobbing your head on that ride, right? So being able to keep your footage stable is a sweet spot. You'll also notice that when selecting this option, that when you hit record, the frame does slightly crop in a bit, and the image does drift a little bit on the sides as the camera compensates for all that shaking. The stabilization almost even makes it look like you're floating. It's a little weird, gets a little bit getting used to, but it's much better than not having it at all. You can even turn off stabilization if you don't need it. You want that wider image, so you can go ahead and stick it in the corner somewhere like a spy cam or whatever. So between horizon balancing and rock steady, play with either of those and see what you like. So now we can talk about the creative control of our image. For setting number 5, let's talk about colors. If you go back here, swipe down and click on the right hand side here, and we go to color, you can see that we have different options on the right hand side. We got normal 8-bit, 10-bit, HLG, and D-Log-M. When we talk about 8-bit, 10-bit, it's pretty much just talking about how much color availability there is. And just know that there's way more colors in 10-bit to edit with than in 8-bit. So if it's going to give us the 10-bit option, it's worth it, whether or not you plan to mess with colors in the end. Now, if you want to get into something like color grading, you want to select either HLG 10-bit or D-Log. For me, I set mine to D-Log. I'm just used to the workflow of using log footage than HLG, so that's what I'll be selecting. Now, if you're completely new to color correcting, color grading, this may seem weird and even intimidating, but hear me out. D-Log-M is designed for professional color grading in post, in your video editing software. It comes out gray when you get it, when you import it into your computer, but it actually captures way more image information than having all the colors and such baked in to the standard profiles. When we're shooting in camera, we can select D-Log-M and turn color recovery on, so at least it looks kind of normal to our eyes. But when we go ahead and import this to our video editing timelines, we're going to be able to handle things like high contrast situations when you're shooting in bright sunlight with deep shadows, or a colorful environment like a garden or field. D-Log-M will capture those details in both the highlights, the bright parts of the image, and the shadows, the dark parts and the highlights, and you'll be able to mess with those accordingly and to be able to dial them in just as you see fit. The image will look flat, washed out, straight out camera, but that's intentional. Bringing it all back, that's the fun part. If you're not ready to dive into that kind of workflow, then stick for normal 10-bit color for now. But I do encourage you to go ahead and experiment with it sometime if you're editing with something like Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut Pro, even CapCut. The difference in what you can do with your footage can actually be like night and day, like cookies and cream. Now, whether or not you're shooting in D-Log-M, this next setting becomes absolutely critical for maintaining image quality. Setting number 6, noise reduction. Turn it off. Let's go ahead and scroll down here and we'll go to image adjustment, and I just bring that sucker down. Looking at noise reduction and texture, we're gonna bring those two down. This just adds, I prefer to turn these settings down because although it may seem counterintuitive, when you let the camera do the noise reduction, it's making the decisions about the noise and the detail. And sometimes it kind of shaves off too much detail. So I'd rather have that grain in my footage at first and then clean it up myself later in post. Plus, when the camera applies noise reduction, you can't undo it. That detail is just gone forever. But if you really don't want to mess with that in the editing software, then you could just leave it as is, at 0. This is especially important if you're shooting in D-Log M, like we talked about earlier. You want to preserve every bit of detail that you can capture, and then add all that stuff and get the image just as you like in post. This next setting though is going to save you much time when you're out in the field switching between different shooting conditions. This is voice control, enabling for hands-free operation. So to enable voice control, we're going to be sliding down from this main screen and hitting this button right here with the face talking. This feature supports English and Chinese voice commands like start recording, stop recording. Oh, look. You can find these commands also in the main menu. You can swipe down, hit these settings, hit voice control set to English, and then voice commands at the bottom. And this is what we have, just as I said. This is incredibly useful when the camera is mounted somewhere where you cannot easily reach, like on a helmet or attached somewhere in the car, whether it's outside or inside far from you. I use this all the time when I'm recording for things like tennis or pickleball gameplay. It takes a little bit of practice to remember the commands and even getting the camera to respond, especially nice and slow articulated commands, but it's worth it once you get it. The voice recognition is pretty good and it works best when you speak slow and clearly, especially when there's not too much background noise. Once this is set up, there's one more setting to enable when letting our camera run in the background. If we plan to be in front of the camera for somewhat of a long time, then the next changes can't be ignored. So for number 8, we have display and power management. So we're going to optimize our display settings for the maximum battery life. Now that the Action 5 Pro has a bigger battery than before, yes, we can benefit from that. But the way that I set it up, we're going to go ahead and maximize the battery life as much as we can, while still being able to maintain good functionality. First, let's go ahead and adjust the screen brightness. Unless you're shooting in bright sunlight, you don't need your screen to be at full brightness. So we're gonna go to our control menu here. We're gonna swipe down, hit the sun icon, and we're gonna slide it. Usually like 60% is pretty good indoor lights, indoor situation. You can even go lower than that. Actually, at 50. If we're going outdoors, yes, I'll turn up this brightness to check my framing and then bring down the brightness because I'll be walking away from the camera. Here's a pro tip. If you know you're going to do a lot of shooting in one session, we're going to go ahead and turn off our wireless connections. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and swipe down, hit the gear icon, and scroll down to wireless connection and make sure it's turned off. Also, we want to consider how long our screen is left on. Being mindful of which screen you're going to be using the most will help preserve the battery life during your long shooting sessions. I always carry spare batteries, but these settings help me stick to using one battery a day. So we're gonna go ahead and go down to auto power off, and I usually keep mine at 5 minutes. Now, right now I'm keeping this at 5 minutes for this video, but generally I keep it at 2 minutes. I'm going to keep this on always on display because I just want to make sure that this camera is still recording, and display in single screen preview. And for style, because I do believe the more that you have on your screen, the more that it will, use up some power. And then I'm gonna go ahead and scroll up and hit single screen preview, which turns off the screen when locked. So when I record, although I can see everything going on in this image here, I won't be seeing everything in the front. Of course, I want to make sure that I framed up my shot before actually hitting record. Plus, while we're in this mode, we can go ahead and swipe down. We can select how long we want the screen to take before it shuts off. And I'll just set it for 3 seconds. Now that we covered our foundations and creative control, now let's set up one of the best settings on this camera. Setting number 9 is going to be our super slow motion, the mastery of the 240 frames per second settings. Now we are going to be in our video mode, and we're going to swipe up and make sure we have 1080p selected. And then we're going to slide all the way over to 240 frames per second. If you want to go ahead and use the slow motion built-in camera to be able to see it in real time, be slow motion, then we're going to use the slow motion mode for that. The most important thing about shooting in slow motion mode in the camera is that it does not record sound. When we're shooting anything greater than 24 frames per second in video mode, it plays back as normal footage. When we go to video mode and shoot 240 frames per second, you're able to slow the footage down and also speed it up while still maintaining the sound. I mostly use this feature when analyzing sports techniques or even just creating a sense of dramatic moments with action sequences with all the little details. It's pretty darn good for not having to spend thousands of dollars on a super slow motion camera. This is one of the most affordable ways to really get to slow down time and still get great detail. And finally, in order for us to maximize this camera and shoot with the best settings for different scenarios, we're gonna do this one last thing. So for number 10, we are making our own preset settings. When I say presets, I'm talking about the settings that we prepare ahead of time for different lighting conditions. I have different settings for sunny days, low light, and even for action without slow motion mode. When I'm moving between different environments and quickly want to switch between each with the least amount of setup time, using presets is the best way to capture the quality and do it quickly. That's why I go more into detail with it right over here.